Welcome to Module 4, an introduction to the Case Western Reserve University Networked Neuroprosthesis. In this module, we'll go over design principles behind the networked neuroprosthesis, its basic functionality, and describe the accessory products that go along with it. The NNP advances the capabilities of previous FES systems in a few key ways. First, it's modular. Think of it as a series of separate, small stimulators that can be placed around the body and connected to one another. They are powered by the power module and linked by network cables that deliver both power and communication to the different components. Because of this, it's also customizable. The stimulators and electrodes can be distributed in a way that is unique to each user. Again, the common power source and the fact that communication is linked throughout the network allows for flexibility in how these components are placed. Finally, the whole system is intended to be fully implanted, so that users are not dependent on externally worn components. As you'll see, the only external accessories used by the study participants are the battery charging system and a phone app that they can use to monitor their battery level and to switch between exercise and functional modes. Before we get too far, let's clarify some terminology you'll hear throughout the training. We use the term remote module to describe the stimulating or sensing units that are placed remotely from the power module, which is the source of power and communication. There are two different kinds of remote modules that are basically identical in size and shape, but with different markings to distinguish them. The stimulating modules are used to deliver stimulation to the electrodes. They are also called pulse generators and may be given the shorthand PG4 because each one can stimulate up to 4 electrodes. The sensing modules are used to sense myoelectric signals for control. They can also be called recording modules or biopotential modules and may be given the shorthand BP2 because each one can sense up to 2 channels. With that background, let's discuss how the NNP will typically be configured for the grand clinical trial. Our goal is to try to use a consistent set of components across most study participants in order to simplify the surgical implant procedure and programming steps. This consistency will also help in the future when we make our case for reimbursement for the technology and for the surgical procedure. However, please note that because of the modularity of the NNP, it is possible to have some flexibility in the NNP configuration, and sites should discuss this during the pre-surgical planning stage in order to give study participants the best chance of achieving their functional goals. In the grand clinical trial, the basic configuration will consist of 3 stimulating modules, which will allow up to 12 stimulating electrodes, 1 recording module, which will allow 2 MES recording electrodes, 1 power module, and 4 network cables to connect the remote modules in a daisy chain from the power module. Let's take a closer look at the electrodes used with the NNP. These should look familiar. They are the same intramuscular and epimesial designs as those used with the freehand and the ISD-12 systems from earlier. The stimulating end and the cable bodies are identical to those earlier designs. The lengths of electrodes can vary in order to accommodate the user size and distance to the nearest module. In the NNP, network cables are used to connect the system from the power module to the first remote module in the daisy chain, and then to connect from one remote module to the next. Network cables vary in length, so they can be sized to accommodate the individual. We'll go into more detail on the recommended placement of remote modules, network cables, and electrodes in our advanced training segments. Module 11 covers the pre-surgical planning stage, and Module 12 covers the surgical implant procedure itself. So now let's put it all together. Here's a video showing how the implanted components are connected and serve to bring information about the user's intent in the form of myoelectric signals from voluntary contractions to control the activation of paralyzed muscles for hand closing and opening. Now let's take a look at some of the accessories of the system. Participants will be given a separate Android phone with an app that they can use to monitor the battery level of the implant, as well as monitor temperature, which is sometimes important during the charging process. They can use the app to choose between exercise or functional grasp modes, as well as choosing from among functional grasp patterns. Choosing from among grasp patterns can also be done without the app, using myoelectric control signals. Participants will also be given a charging system, consisting of a tabletop interfacing system called the control tower, and a coil that can be placed on the skin over the power module. Power is transferred from the external coil to the receiver coil inside the power module using an inductively coupled link. During charging, there may be local warming of the power module, so the current design also includes a cooling feature. However, it's important to note that the charging system is expected to undergo iteration and refinement, even during the clinical trial, to optimize its performance, including shortening the charging time and eliminating the need for cooling. How often the study participants need to recharge their system will depend on their typical patterns of usage. A programming system is used by the technical team and may be used by therapists during the clinical trial to program the implant system. During programming, a low-power wireless RF link communicates to the implanted power module, allowing grasp patterns and exercise patterns to be downloaded to the system. We'll go into more detail on how to program the NNP in Module 13. The NNP system is expected to give good functional outcomes, consistent with what we've seen in earlier studies. Its flexibility and modular design mean that trial sites can configure the placement of implanted components to give users good grasp patterns that they can control themselves with myoelectric signals. The grand clinical trial is designed to characterize these functional outcomes as well as the NNP's safety profile. In summary, the NNP is a modular, configurable, fully implanted FES system with implantable components that interconnect to provide functional grasp patterns. System accessories offer participants flexibility in how they use the system. The strategy of the grand clinical trial is to configure the system to give users the best chance of achieving their functional goals, while collecting outcome data to support a future regulatory approval. Congratulations on completing Module 4. Next up in Module 5, an introduction to the grand clinical trial.